Okay, let's dive right into this because we have some truly mind-bending concepts to unpack today. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to deconstruct a brilliantly fascinating piece of source material from Dreamweaver. Specifically, we are zooming in on a very particular, very intricate sequence centered around the field of water. Now, we are so used to seeing fantasy worlds where magic is just, well, it's just magic, right? A character waves a wand, says a few Latin-sounding words, or maybe just flexes their sheer willpower and poof, fireball. But here, the source material takes an entirely different, incredibly grounded route. This esoteric magic system is rigorously, heavily governed by real-world physics, scientific principles, hardcore meteorology, and even bioelectromagnetism. We are going to break down exactly how the characters, Mitsuki and Arlene, navigate these intense elemental challenges, not by just casting random spells, but by applying strict scientific logic to mystical problems. It is an absolute masterclass in world building. Seriously, it's like a giant puzzle where physics meets fantasy, and I am so excited to break it all down for you. So, let's get into it.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We've categorized this massive, complex magic system into 4 clear thematic scientific disciplines. Number 1, unlocking the elemental gates. Number 2, simulating planetary atmospheres. Number 3, waves as augmented reality. And number 4, bioelectromagnetism and water.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, unlocking the elemental gates.
So picture this. When our characters, Mitsuki and Arlene, along with their companion Helios, first arrive at this trial, they aren't just, aggressively blasting doors off their hinges to get inside. It doesn't work like that. They are immediately faced with a logic puzzle. They find themselves standing before 2 distinct gates, and they have to make a choice. First, they inspect the quartz tablet sitting right in front of the Gate of Time. The activation conditions listed there are very specific. It requires the power of temperance, and, crucially, it says, activate all other halls. Now, Mitsuki, being the incredibly sharp analytical thinker she is, immediately realizes they simply cannot proceed through that door yet. It's basic logic, right? The puzzle literally dictates that the other halls have to be active first. But then they look at the alternative. The stark contrast of the Gate of Water offers them a real path forward. Its activation conditions are the powers of rebirth, life, kindness, and purification. Mitsuki looks at this list and deduces that they actually currently meet these conceptual conditions. It's such a great narrative setup because it perfectly establishes exactly why they must proceed into the field of water first. It's a logical, forced sequence rather than just some arbitrary, let's go left kind of choice.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because the source text doesn't just stop at opening a door, it layers in this brilliant linguistic lore that just deepens the whole experience. As they're getting ready to enter, Arlene starts reflecting on that condition of kindness and the actual material of the tablet itself, which is sapphire. Checking her records, she notes something fascinating. The word sapphire could potentially trace its roots all the way back to the Hebrew word shapar, which translates to be pleasing or harmoniously composed. And it goes further. She draws this super cool connection between the Latin word for water, aqua, and how it phonetically echoes the English word acquire, which of course means to procure or obtain. When she points this out, Mitsuki actually laughs and jokes that her sigil is putting them through the linguistics ringer. I love this moment. It acts as a fantastic intellectual breather for the audience, right? But it also heavily hints at the deeper, harmoniously composed nature of the water element they are about to face. It's all connected, and they're going to need that harmony because they are about to dive headfirst into some heavy atmospheric physics on the other side of that door.
Which brings us perfectly into Section 2, simulating planetary atmospheres.
Okay, so once they actually get through the gate, they enter the Hall of Water. Specifically, they step into a subhall of cloud that appears to be completely fused with a subhall of snow. Now, this entire sequence, it is a literal masterclass in planetary meteorology, just cleverly disguised as magical evocation. The environment is specific, the ground is wet, and they find themselves surrounded by this ambient electromagnetic field. So what does Mitsuki do? She absolutely doesn't just yell out a storm spell. Instead, she executes a highly logical, step-by-step scientific method. Step 1. She generates a specialized bubble of insulation around her team. This is absolutely crucial to protect them from ambient radiation. Then, taking stock of her surroundings, she notes that the room's setup actually simulates a planet's natural electromagnetic field, a field that contains an atmosphere. So she moves to Step 2. She actively, deliberately raises the atmospheric pressure inside the subhall. What happens when you do that? The air rapidly begins to collapse on itself due to the pressure change, and that direct physical reaction brings us right to Step 3. That collapsing air forces the moisture that was sitting on the wet ground to suddenly evaporate upward into the air. And because that overarching electromagnetic field prevents this newly evaporated moisture from just dissipating away, it forces it to form contained clouds right there inside the room. Do you see what she did? She literally built a functioning microclimate using raw physics.
As this localized storm actually begins to brew inside the room, Mitsuki takes a moment to explain the mechanics of what she's doing to Arlene. And the text provides us with this incredibly evocative comparison. She describes clouds as being literal storehouses of atmospheric energy. In this system, they act as tensors for a planet. They are essentially massive batteries, building up energy, especially in hot climates, which is exactly the condition they are currently simulating. But you can't just build up energy forever, right? On the other side of that atmospheric equation, she describes storms, snow, and rain as the tension release mechanisms. To make this huge planetary concept instantly relatable, Mitsuki uses a brilliant everyday analogy. She says storms can proverbially be viewed as a planet literally blowing off some steam. It acts exactly like a steam valve on a pressure cooker, safely releasing that wildly built-up atmospheric tension before it breaks the system.
Arlene immediately grasps this. She realizes that the accumulation of clouds is the tensor, the buildup, and the resulting storm is the essential release. Mitsuki confirms she hit the nail on the head, and then she expands on how real-world celestial mechanics actively maintain this exact harmony on a planetary scale. She literally lists out the components that maintain a planet's atmosphere in our reality, perfectly mirroring the magic they are currently manipulating. First, you have the sun's ultraviolet rays, which act as the primary energy supply. Then, you have the Earth's electromagnetic field providing the crucial containment, stopping all that precious atmospheric energy from just bleeding out into the cold vacuum of the cosmos. Next is the moon's gravitational influence, which famously shifts the ocean's tides. And finally, the Earth's axial tilt and its orbit around the sun, which determine the cyclical rhythm of the seasons. Mitsuki cites all of these real-world facts to explain that atmospheric magic in this universe is essentially just the intentional manipulation of these harmonious, naturally occurring celestial interactions. And the crazy part? As she's speaking these facts, the temperature in the room plummets, and her scientifically induced magic causes it to physically rain in the subhall of cloud and snow in the subhall of snow. Science literally becomes magic.
Moving right along, let's get into Section 3, Waves as Augmented Reality.
So, having completely mastered the atmospheric puzzle, the characters proceed to the next area, the subhall of waves. Now, when they walk in, it appears completely 100% empty. There are no features, no obvious puzzles, nothing. But Arlene checks her data sensors and realizes the room is actually overflowing with elemental energy. This means they are going to have to rely entirely on extrasensory perception to navigate, and this right here brilliantly illustrates the sheer depth of this magic system. Mitsuki realizes a fundamental truth of this world. Waves are just the visible imprints of invisible energy. To gather the data they need in this seemingly empty void of a room, she shuts her eyes and intentionally, meticulously syncs her biological perception to distinct environmental wavelengths. And she doesn't just do this once or twice, she does this an astonishing 7 separate times, effectively peeling back the invisible layers of reality one single wavelength at a time. The mental load of that is just staggering to think about.
And let me tell you, the specific facets of reality she manages to reveal by doing this are just mind-blowing. Let's unpack the data. First, she syncs her perception to heat and wind. Instantly, the invisible aerial currents and swirling heat waves in the room become vividly, visually perceptible to her. Next, she shifts and syncs to the Earth wavelength. Suddenly, she can literally see ethereal energy streaming northward, heading off toward various celestial bodies. Then, she does something incredible. She syncs to the chrono, or time wavelength. This overlay allows her to see the exact vitality levels of everyone standing in the room. She can see what specific factors are causing them bodily strain, what elements are boosting their energy, and she can even see the physical, historical wear and tear of the ancient structures around them mapped out over time. Fourth, syncing to the hydro wave reveals these highly distinct patterns and deeply decipherable connections woven into her surroundings. Syncing to lightning, that reveals the raw frequencies, the microscopic oscillations, and the traits of the elements, plus the phenomena naturally evoked by their physical interactions. Finally, she syncs to the wavelength of light itself, and her mind basically expands to grasp the ultimate significance of all this overlapping data. She even syncs to the physical waves of Arlene's recording device, converting all of this profound ethereal perception into hard, quantifiable data that Arlene can permanently record.
During this incredible process, Mitsuki makes a really profound observation. She notes that these waves essentially act as veils, concealing entirely different layers of reality from normal sight. She says, and I quote, "Tapping into specific waves is quite similar to having an augmented reality overlay." I mean, I absolutely love this quote.
is a brilliant, completely modern tech analogy pulled straight from the source material. It takes this highly esoteric, mystical concept of magical sight or magi's and makes it incredibly grounded for us today. She isn't just vaguely seeing magic float around. She's literally toggling different biological AR filters over her environment to extract very specific, highly targeted data sets.
Arlene, observing all of this, is understandably incredibly excited. She realizes just what phenomenal, game-changing tutorials this raw data is going to make for others. She has this massive aha moment, leading her to a huge deduction. She states, waves are not only visible imprints of invisible energy, they are also physical manifestations of spiritual energy, and at the same time they are storehouses of elemental energy and data. This realization is absolutely crucial. It beautifully bridges the hard physical science of measurable wavelengths with the intangible, spiritual, elemental energy of their universe. It means that every single invisible wave flowing through that room is a literal vault of data, just waiting to be correctly perceived.
And that brings us to our final stop in this explainer, Section 4, Bioelectromagnetism and Water.
Because Mitsuki and Arlene successfully activated the previous halls, this new space they enter, the sub-hall of wood, actually begins to rapidly nurture life. Green plants begin to sprout right before their very eyes. This draws a direct, undeniable line between biology, botany, and the elemental energy systems they've just been studying. So, what does Mitsuki do? She immediately applies her new AR-like vision to these newly sprouting crops. She syncs to the wavelength of water specifically to perceive exactly how water is being physically transported within the cellular structures of the plants. But then she pushes it further. Simultaneously, she syncs to the wavelength of lightning to perceive the invisible bioelectromagnetic aura radiating from those same plants. As she observes both of these complex, invisible systems working in tandem, she notices something truly profound. There is a direct, observable, one-to-one correlation between the range of water transport within the living being and the overall strength of its bioelectromagnetic aura. Put simply, the better and more efficient the water transport, the stronger and larger the aura. She looks at Arlene, and they both realize this isn't just a quirk of botany. This is a fundamental law that applies to absolutely all living beings in this universe.
So the absolutely crucial point here is why this happens. Mitsuki deduces the core scientific rule governing this phenomenon in their world. She realizes that water transforms a unidirectional electric current into an omnidirectional current. I want you to let that sink in for a second. The ambient electricity inside a living body normally wants to flow in one straight direction, right? But water acts as a biological catalyst. It takes that straight line electrical energy and expands it outward in all directions simultaneously, literally shaping, boosting, and expanding the bioelectromagnetic energy fields of living things. And as she usually does, Mitsuki brilliantly loops this newfound energy generation process directly into the room's mechanics, solving the final piece of the puzzle in the field of water.
It's an incredibly satisfying, full-circle conclusion to a magic system that relies so heavily on logic, observation, and real-world physics. And honestly, I think it leaves us with something really fascinating to ponder as we wrap this up. We've just watched these characters use the actual hard physics of planetary atmospheres, electromagnetic fields, and light wavelength to systematically navigate a magical trial. So we really have to ask ourselves, if water physically shapes the electromagnetic auras of living beings in this fantasy world, and if manipulating invisible waves conceals entire layers of augmented reality, what invisible waves are actively shaping ours? What hidden data, what massive invisible structures are we walking through every single day, completely unseen, simply waiting for us to figure out how to sync to the right wavelength? It really makes you look at the science hidden in our own everyday world just a little bit differently, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the explainer. Keep your eyes open, stay curious, and keep questioning the reality around you. Catch you next time.